Hey YouTube! So I recently rented the RF 28-70 f2, which many know as the Beast. It's widely respected as one of the absolute best lenses on the Canon system, or the best zoom lens, and this is primarily because it's f2 all the way through its zoom range, which essentially replaces all these amazing prime lenses like the 24, 1.8, the 35, the 50, the 85, or at least close to it, all in one lens. That's a lot of savings and a lot of time switching lenses that you can just leave one lens on the camera. Some might see the fact that it's 28 millimeters and not 24 as a major downfall, but I actually find that as a nice restriction because I don't like shooting at 24 millimeters. I find it dramatically warps subjects and environments at that range. And although it's correctable in post, it's not always perfect and gives you the best results. And they would also say that a 70 millimeter doesn't replace an 85 prime, but from the results I saw, it was just as beautiful and offered very similar compression and was even more usable indoors. It was very adaptable to almost any situation. Unfortunately, my time with the lens was a bit short. It was just over a weekend, but I had a packed schedule. I had a wedding to shoot on Saturday, and I had lots of family fun on Sunday, indoors and outdoors. So I want to walk you through each of those scenarios and talk about what it was like using the lens in those situations. So jumping right in, starting with my Saturday morning, heading off to a wedding. It was shot at the Old Mill Inn, downtown Toronto, and it's got a reputation and it's known as one of the darkest, most underlit chapels in probably all of the GTA. And I've shot there before with my 24-105 f4, and I remember back not really loving my results because at f4 in this dark environment, you're really forced to jack up the ISO like 5,000 plus. So you're getting kind of grainy shots, and if you want to keep your speed high, you've got to keep it in that range. And speed lights only do so much. It's got a black high arch roof, so there's not a lot of bounce happening. Don't want to blast my subject. But I'll be honest that having f2 on my camera at the 28-70 range, I felt nearly invincible the whole day. I never once felt like I needed to change lenses to capture a certain moment in a certain way, get more into view or get a better shot or change my aperture and depth of field. I had it all in my hands the whole day. I only have one camera body, so that was even more of a limitation factor that I should have been afraid of, but no, I felt great. I always had the right tool for the job in every scenario. And in each scenario, I had this beautiful aesthetic of the f2 depth of field. I never once felt like I needed to change my lens for a lower aperture. I had my speed light on my camera the whole time, and I felt like it was more of an option, whether I wanted a bit of a more of a natural light look or full well lit look of having a speed light attached to it. But you still need the lower aperture to help out with that. I always felt like I had maximum creative control at f2 within the whole range, much like I felt when I'm shooting with the 135. It just has this beautiful aesthetic to it at f2 where you've got a nice blurry foreground bokeh, and it's hard to describe that feeling that lens gives you, but I got the exact same feeling with the 28-70. And if you want to learn a bit more about how I felt about that, go check out my video about the 135mm, the EF version, and it'll help you understand what I'm talking about. So something that we need to talk about with this lens is its enormous size. When you walk into a room with the 28-70 on your camera, you will absolutely draw eyeballs. You'll get noticed, and you'll get a lot of attention. And at a wedding event, as a photographer, this is actually a really good thing. People immediately started to make comments, either directly or kind of in conversation, about the size of the lens and how I must have been a good photographer and I must be getting great shots. And there was this overwhelming sense of confidence and comfort that I could get the job done because of this incredible gear that I was using. And I think that's really important if you are a professional photographer and you shoot weddings. As a marketing tool, walking around with something that sells you as you walk around is an invaluable tool. Because let's be honest, this is a creative industry. Visual appearances matter. The way you dress and show up to a wedding and how you show up says something about you and your business and your competence and your confidence and your skill level. So why not your gear as well? And it doesn't get any bigger and better than the 28 to 70, having that around. So at this wedding, I was only a second shooter. I was only needed for about half the day. But by the end of the day, my experience with this lens was extremely painful. Holding this lens with this camera with a speed light for 4 hours straight was extremely painful. My palm and my hand and my wrist and my knuckles were all really in a lot of pain. And I probably could have pressed on for a little bit, but to do another 4 hours holding that camera would have been nearly impossible. I would have been shaking. The muscles in my hand would have been overworked. Maybe that's just me, but I would have needed to switch to a lighter lens to finish that day off, which kind of sucks because this is a $4,000 lens that you can only use for a limited amount of time. So that's something we'll talk about a little bit later in this video too. I thought that maybe having some kind of camera hand strap might have taken a bit of the weight off between shots. Could have just rested my arm and give it a bit of a break. I'm not a big camera strap guy. I don't like walking around with that thing. I think it's a bit tacky. It bumps into things, and especially with this even larger frontal lens, the risk of that hitting something is just way too great. I wouldn't want to risk it. But with this lens, you would want to have somewhere to secure it, some kind of strap system, some kind of way to attach it to keep it safe, keep the weight off of your hand in order to shoot with it, or have a second camera handy with a lighter lens. So that's really important to know, is that the weight is a huge factor for this lens in long-term shooting like weddings. So as far as an image review, looking at these images in post after the wedding is done, I was blown away by the visual aesthetic quality. Personally, I don't own a sub 35mm low aperture lens. So I don't know what 24 to 35 at f2 or 1.8 even looks like. And it was stunning to see the variety of images from 28 to 70, all in this low aperture, me using depth of field and foreground objects, everything, the beauty was magnified. I'm used to shooting 24 to 105 and doing this techniques, but it didn't look like, it looked twice as good. I will just leave it at that. So I would absolutely rent this lens again for a wedding to achieve that kind of result. And I could actually see, Canon wedding photographers, this becoming a must. If you want the top level kind of creative look for your lens, you kind of have to get this lens. Unless you're going to be switching in and out gear throughout the day, missing some shots here and there, which I don't think that that's something you should ever really do. This lens is amazing. It was a creative game changer. You'll save time and increase your creativity throughout the whole day, but you have to invest in some sort of strapping holding system because, as we mentioned, this lens is too heavy to carry in your hands for 8 to 12 hours in a day. You're going to regret it, and your hand will be too shaky. You'll be getting blurry shots. It's not worth the risk. There is one negative thing that I noticed is that I don't know how to put my finger on it. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't prove it, but some of the images, or most of the images, looked just a little bit softer than I normally expect. And I've seen a lot of different lenses on different camera bodies, and you kind of just pick up a sense of things, but this lens is perhaps just not as sharp as the ultra high-end primes or the best L series gear out there. They were not bad by any means, and I couldn't even prove it side-by-side images, but it's just a feeling I got that things could have just been a little bit sharper. So the next scenario I want to talk about is shooting indoors with this. I hadn't taken family photos in quite a long time with my big digital camera. I just needed a break from it. I was happy with just taking cell phone pictures, but I wanted some nice creative shots again of the family. So renting this lens was a signal to me, to maybe update some of my photos. And I can tell you that this camera is magical for that. This lens is much more suited to these small bursts of creativity instead of long, heavy handheld usage. I could just take a shot, put it down, and I never felt tired or overworked. One issue with the size of this camera and lens is finding a place to put it down. Normally I'm okay just kind of putting it on a kitchen table or somewhere, or a coffee table, or the media unit, but it's so big and draws so much attention. I felt like it was either going to fall over, something was going to hit it, somebody might notice it and start touching it. If you're in a small minimalist condo, this might actually be a bit of an inconvenience trying to put this down somewhere, but in my space, I didn't feel like I couldn't find a space, but it was a second thought in my mind. I'm like, okay, where do I put this thing? I can't just put this down on the ground or whatever, because you're not using a strap at home, but it's something to think about that, how much space do you have at home to put this thing in a spot? One of the most amazing things about using this 28-70 f2 indoors is that you can do the work so quickly, so creatively. You can get back to the moment and being in this close indoor environment without spending a whole lot of time tinkering, changing lenses, wondering if you're in the right spot. You have full maximum creative output at the whole range very quickly, so you can just quickly get your shot and then put it down and rest. And I found I was working faster, and I was able to put it down and rest more and enjoy my time with the family more than I had with any lens ever. I by far had some of the best, most creative photos I'd ever taken indoors of my family because of the nice f2 range. And if you've ever tried to take family photos before, you'll know that kids like to run up to the camera and then run away into a dark corner, and it's really, really easy to miss moments, especially if you're using like a fixed prime lens. I like the 35. You're always never close enough, or you're too far away, and you wish you had another lens, and you kind of just have to sacrifice something or quickly switch and then miss a moment. You will never miss a single moment. Everything you do, everywhere you are, anybody you're with, it will be pure magic. It's really unbelievable what you can do and how quickly you can do it, and then just put it down and go back to what you were doing. It was an amazing experience to work with this lens. You'll never feel tired. Your hand will never hurt. It's wonderful. Looking at these images in post, there's not much more I can add that would be different than the wedding shots. I had the most creative variety of images I'd ever seen. Again, there's just that really feeling of just a slight softness to the image quality that I can't quite put my finger on, but it wasn't anything that destroyed any image that I took. So the last scenario is outdoors. I took this after a big snowstorm outside with the family, and I was really nervous taking this out because there was snow everywhere. What if I slipped and fall? This thing is huge. I'm going to draw lots of attention from these other families. It felt awkward, and I didn't like it. I just kept it in my sling bag, which it fit perfectly. I would just take it out quick, take a couple photos and put it back, which, as I mentioned, you can do because you have so much creative control, so much variety and range that you don't need to have it out for a long time. I was able to get something really creative and really quick and beautiful and then put it away. But this is not an outdoor lens. This is not something you want to take to a safari or very far away. It's much too heavy long term to even have in a backpack. Your shoulder will hurt. And it just draws way too much attention. There's a huge risk of this being stolen and noticed. It's not something you want to have around. So I don't recommend this for outdoor travel or like street photography. Something I noticed is that I typically work with the 24-105 like I'm using right now on this for this video, and f4, everything is very much in focus still. You can see here, you can still kind of see where I am and what's behind me. It has a very photojournalistic appeal and look to the images, and that's not the most beautiful thing in the world if you're taking family portraits and fun photos. So having f2 at the 28-70 range to take all of these photos all day, all weekend, and indoors and outdoors and family was really stunning. It adds just such an amazing look to the images that I've never really seen before in all of my work, especially at these wider open ranges like the 28. Really, really stunning. So happy that I got to check this out. So let's wrap this up and talk about a conclusion here. So I can safely say that I absolutely recommend this lens. If you have $4,000 lying around burning a hole in your pocket and you're in need of this zoom range and you're an event photographer and you're okay with everything we talked about, absolutely. It's just an amazing lens. But the question is, would I buy it right now? And is it worth the money? If money is an issue, I don't think it is. I think this lens is overpriced for what it's offering and what it can do. And what I mean by that is, first of all, it has no image stabilization built into it. Like, it is so common in these days for high-end lenses. I feel like the image quality proved that it's kind of missing that. I've looked at some scientific tests of this lens that show that, you know, only the middle third of the image is the most sharpest quality, and so 2/3 of the canvas you're just getting a slightly softer look. I don't think that any pro photographer should sacrifice maximum image quality edge to edge to gain creative quality. I think it's a zero-sum game. So I would just need to do a bit more testing with this lens. I want to see what the 24 to 70 f2.8 can do. How much more creative are you sacrificing at the 2.8 and gaining in image quality with the image stabilization and however that lens is built. So by no means is this lens bad or blurry or poor, but there's just something, some tiny bit that just felt like it was missing to be worth $4,000. I think I'm just going to keep my eye on this one. I'm going to wait on it. I'm not going to rush out and purchase it. I need to do a little bit more testing, a little bit more research, try a few other lenses to see if this is really what I need myself. But man, I think I've given this enough praise to see just what's possible with this lens and how amazing it can be. So guys, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something, and I'll check you guys soon.